Why should we study theology? Does it really give us objective knowledge about the world? And what does it mean to call theology a science? Aquinas asks this question, actually tries to define more generally what is a science, and he takes there a philosophical definition from Aristotle first. Science is basically just an organized body of knowledge developed to understand a given subject. So you take biology. Biologists study living things. They develop a science of living organisms. Ethicists study human moral activity. They develop a science of ethics. Metaphysicians study everything that exists insofar as it exists, and that's what we call the science of being. Those are all subjects of natural reason. So it's a kind of a general definition of science. So Aquinas also then asks, can we consider Christian theology as science as well? And if so, in what sense? And he's talking about the study of divine revelation, the mystery of God revealed in Christ. Now, actually, his answer to this question is nuanced. Aquinas does affirm that theology, properly speaking, is a science. It's a study of the inner intelligibility of the mystery of God revealed in Christ through the church. But he also notes that it differs significantly from other sciences primarily because theology's principles, or starting points, are not derived from evidential knowledge, from things we ordinarily experience or our own natural knowledge of the world. Instead, theology's first principles are given vertically, as it were, in divine revelation by God. How do we know, for example, that Christ is both God and human, or that God actually became human? Well, we know those things by the grace of faith. It's a supernatural gift to enlighten the mind, and it gives us first starting points. And likewise, we know that God is the mystery of the Holy Trinity by the grace of faith. So the core truths of Christianity are known, and they're certain, but they're not known by natural demonstration or philosophical argument, but by a deeper form of insight provided by the grace of the Holy Spirit. And actually, that's part of the point. Divine revelation is meant to take us beyond or above our merely human range of knowing, so as to introduce us into friendship and intellectual familiarity with God. By faith and hope and charity, the human being begins to participate in the very knowledge of God and of the saints. Staying only within our limited range of natural understanding, then, would mean excluding ourselves from the opportunity to know more about God than we could know by our own mere human powers. So, it is a science, but it's a science made possible by grace. That's an interesting qualification, and it's rather significant. God gives you the grace to embark on an intelligent study of God's own mystery. Secondly, Aquinas notes that the truths of revelation given us to study are compatible with the truths of all other forms of knowledge, or the sciences we acquire naturally. So the truths of revelation are not contrary to natural reason ever. The things that God reveals are above nature. That's why we call them supernatural, because super comes from the Greek for above. But there's no substitute for faith, as if you could just depend only on natural knowledge. You need this higher knowledge. And God affords us certain helps to see that revelation is rational to believe in. So, for example, we can study the mysteries in their internal coherence and see the integrity of revelation. We can examine how the mysteries illuminate the human condition and how the truth of Christianity casts light on ordinary human experience. We can prove some things available to reason that dovetail with revelation, like proving the existence of God by philosophical argument, which is also a revealed truth. And finally, God gives confirming signs, which the church traditionally calls reasons of credibility, such as miracles, to manifest the truth of revelation. So faith, in the end, depends on testimony. God speaks, he reveals himself, and we create a science around the truth of that revelation and look at its intelligibility, but it's compatible with reason, and we have signs that it's actually rational to engage with the revelation. The center of this science is the knowledge of the Holy Trinity. If we really want to understand the mystery of revelation, we have to understand who God is, and then understand everything else in light of God. So, for example, we think about the second most important mystery in Christianity, the Incarnation, in light of the Trinity, because the mystery of the Trinity is made known in and through the Incarnation. Who God is in himself is revealed to us because God became human. And that dynamic is also at work in the other doctrines of the faith. If you study in a theological way, scientifically you could say, the sacraments, or the Blessed Virgin Mary, or the grace of Jesus Christ, These all somehow manifest the revelation of God, who God is, as Trinity, and are understood rightly in the light of God. Even with divine revelation, we cannot perfectly comprehend in an inclusive, total way who God is, especially in this life. But faith is a real form of knowing God, and it's not the same thing as the vision of God or an immediate intellectual perception of God, but it gives us light and knowledge into who God is. So faith provides us with a kind of ultimate perspective on life, both through theology and through the spiritual life and mysticism, which don't compete with one another, but complement one another. But in this sense, faith gives rise to a science open to mystery, so that theology is pointing us towards something beyond theology in our own spiritual life. It's pointing us towards union with God. For readings, podcasts, and more videos like this, go to Aquinas101.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for one of our free video courses on Aquinas. And don't forget to like and share with your friends, because it matters what you think.
One of the great questions of all times is whether human beings can know any absolute truth. And a simple way to answer in the affirmative is to consider the principle of non-contradiction. The ancient Greeks developed a number of disciplines, or branches of knowledge, such as geometry, medicine, physics, etc. In the language of Thomas Aquinas, each of these branches of knowledge is a science, and each science studies a different kind of reality. Geometry is the study of continuous quantities, medicine the study of health, and physics the study of moving things. If each science studies some specific kind of reality or being, could there be a discipline or science that does not study one specific kind of being, such as living things or human beings, but studies being as such? Aristotle thought so, and he called this science metaphysics. The purpose of metaphysics is to ask about reality as a whole, and to search out the features and causes of beings as such. Now, just as geometry has its principles, so too metaphysics has its principles. One of the most important principles of metaphysics is the principle of non-contradiction. In one of its standard forms, the principle goes like this: it is impossible for something to be and not be at the same time and in the same respect. For example, it is impossible for a man to be both 6 feet tall and not 6 feet tall at the same time. It is impossible for a ball to be red and not red at the same time and in the same respect. For example, all over. Or, for a simpler example still, it is impossible for Socrates to exist and not exist at the same time. Aristotle says that the principle of non-contradiction is a first principle. It cannot be proven, but also it doesn't need to be proven. It is self-evident to reason. It is a common principle, or an axiom underlying all disciplines and all investigations. If detectives working on a case, for example, were to find a set of clues that a suspect was at a certain store at 7 p.m. on Friday night, and were later to find another set of clues that the suspect was not at the store at 7 p.m. on Friday night, the detectives would think through the clues in order to reconcile them. But they would not hold that the suspect was both at the store at 7 p.m. Friday and not at the store at 7 p.m. Friday. No one would believe them, and they themselves would not be able to believe it. For in the back of all our minds, we all know that it is impossible for something to be and not to be at the same time and in the same respect. No one can doubt the principle of non-contradiction once they understand it. But many people misunderstand it at first glance. Some people think it is saying that no human being can hold contradictory beliefs. But that is not what the principle is saying. Some people think it says that people cannot have conflicting experiences of things, for example, the quality of a movie. But that is not what the principle is saying. The principle is not about our subjective beliefs, experiences, or perspectives on things. The principle is about things. That is, reality itself. It is saying that reality is not contradictory, even though people often are, both within themselves and with each other. Since the principle of non-contradiction underlies all disciplines and all investigations, we can learn from it something important about reality as such. Reality is self-consistent. When we say that reality is self-consistent, we are not saying it about this or that kind of thing, such as living things or quantities. We're saying it about all things, about beings as such, and about reality as a whole. The principle of non-contradiction stands as a kind of witness that human beings can know something solid and true about reality as a whole. The great calling of philosophy and metaphysics is to say much more about reality as a whole. For readings, podcasts, and more videos like this, go to Aquinas101.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for one of our free video courses on Aquinas. And don't forget to like and share with your friends, because it matters what you think. Our world is filled with conflicting opinions and perspectives about many things. And the clash of opinions and perspectives leads many people to despair about the possibility of finding any truth. But the ancient philosopher Aristotle saw in the conflict of opinions not a reason to despair about finding truth, but precisely an opportunity to find it. Aristotle was the first to codify a process of inquiry called dialectic. It was a form of investigation he had learned from his predecessors. Aristotle thought that all human beings were born into an ocean of truth, and no one is so ignorant as to have no truth. The problem is that we have a great deal of truth, but it is out of order in our experience and in our minds. That is why there are so many conflicting opinions about things. We are all born into a cultural web consisting of experience, literature, music, laws, common opinions, sayings of the wise, and lessons of life that we pick up for ourselves along the way. As we grow in understanding of the world, we always run into difficulties or puzzles about things. For example, we are taught that snow melts when the temperature is higher than 32 degrees. But then we learn that on the top of the Rocky Mountains, there is snow, and the temperature is higher than 32 degrees. What we have here is a difficulty, or puzzle, that needs to be resolved. Aristotle thought of all progress in understanding as a matter of confronting these kinds of difficulties, wrestling with them, drawing distinctions, and gaining insights. In the example of snow, we need to distinguish between temperature at sea level and temperatures at higher altitudes and discover the difference that barometric pressure makes in the melting of snow. Down through the centuries, Christians have faced similar difficulties and puzzles, confronting them both in the sources of divine revelation and in the philosophical tradition. Certain scriptural passages, for example, can seem to conflict, or two fathers of the church can seem to have conflicting interpretations of the same passage. These are exactly the sorts of difficulties that are part of the human process of growing in understanding. What we need to do is to let the sources of revelation and the wisdom of the philosophers speak to us, and confront the puzzles and difficulties they pose, and wrestle with them, and draw distinctions, and acquire new insights. When the texts of Aristotle were rediscovered in the West in the High Middle Ages, the process of dialectic that he codified was rediscovered as a tool for systematically working through puzzles and difficulties. But now, the process of dialectic was used by Christians to work through the puzzles and difficulties confronting us in the sources of divine revelation and the wisdom of the philosophers. And the result was a new form of theological inquiry that we find in the scholastics and especially in Thomas Aquinas. This is the history behind the format of the disputed question we find in his works. First, we pose a question. Second, we confront puzzles and difficulties. Third, we draw distinctions in order to acquire insights. then we're in a position to address our original difficulties. The calling of St. Thomas Aquinas was to pose all the most relevant questions, face all the most relevant difficulties involved in each question, and draw all the relevant distinctions. That was his intellectual achievement. And for the most part, his answers are perennial truths. For readings, podcasts, and more videos like this, go to Aquinas101.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for one of our free video courses on Aquinas. And don't forget to like and share with your friends, because it matters what you think.
In every age, human beings try to order their thinking about the question, what is ultimately real? How do we explain what the world consists of? You might say this is a question about what are the deep down causes of things. And the investigation is traditionally called metaphysics. It's an odd title, but it's not a difficult idea to understand. Metaphysics is just the study of the science of being, of that which exists, insofar as it exists. You might say that metaphysics is a structured way of thinking about the most fundamental explanations of the world that we encounter. When Aquinas defines metaphysics, he says that its object of study is the causes of existence in things. Why do things exist? In metaphysics, we consider the beings of this world, their natures, their properties, material constitution, the changes they're submitted to, their contingency, their relations that obtain within and among them, and we consider why various things exist from every angle. Do you and I exist because of our material bodies? Or do we exist because we have living souls? Do we exist because we were begotten by our parents? Or do we exist due to the dependence we have on the larger physical cosmos? Or do we exist because of the creation of God sustaining all things in being? Or is it due to all of the above, but in a given order? And if so, how do we order those explanations? That gives you an idea of the overview. But what about the basic starting points? When beginning to consider what being is, St. Thomas identifies certain fundamental distinctions we should make. First, we can discern the differences that obtain between different kinds of natural substances around us. How are they distinguished from one another? A human being, for example, is very different from a kangaroo. We distinguish them by their different properties, which we can analyze philosophically. Both are animals and mammals and have complex sense organs. So they're living things, they're sentient living things, and they have all kinds of mobile properties that are similar. But human beings are rational animals who think, make decisions, use language and tools, while kangaroos do not do any of those things. Now, other properties they do sort of share, but also are distinguished by just at the level of animality. So, for example, kangaroos nurture their young in a pouch after birth, but human beings do not. So these kinds of properties reveal characteristics of the various natures of things, and they tell us something about what those things are, their essences, and therefore why they exist or how they exist. This is a first kind of way of proceeding into metaphysics. We can study the distinctions of the various substances we encounter and their properties philosophically. But having distinguished substances, we can then go on to consider what unites them or what they all have in common. What is it that's properly basic or common to all kinds of beings, no matter how different they are? We might talk about dimensions of being that are common to human beings, kangaroos, trees, stars, stones, and artifacts. So here's where we enter into the study of what Aquinas calls the transcendentals: being, unity, truth, goodness, and beauty. Everything that exists has being in some way and is unified, true or intelligible, good and thus desirable or pleasing, and beautiful. It has a certain kind of splendor or harmony to it. At this point, we can begin asking more ultimate questions. Is this world of interdependent beings that we experience one reality or multiple realities that form a kind of unity? Is the cosmos that exists around us and the things that are in it good in some objective sense? And if so, are there degrees and kinds of goodness in the things around us? And if so, what is evil, and how do we explain the existence of evil? Meanwhile, what is beauty, and is it merely subjective, or are the things of this world truly beautiful due to the harmonies internal to them and the order within them? Does the world of finite, interdependent beings ultimately depend upon a primary cause that we call God, who gives being to all things? And if so, how do being and unity, goodness and beauty and truth all relate back to God as the cause of everything that exists? For Aquinas, metaphysicians endeavor to study the things of this world by an honest and critical appraisal, and in so doing, they are led to consider reality in relation to God as the cause of existence for everything that is. When you've begun thinking about the kinds of questions I've just raised, you're doing metaphysics. You've arrived, or you've started. And St. Thomas is a great guide for this kind of study. For readings, podcasts, and more videos like this, go to Aquinas101.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for one of our free video courses on Aquinas. And don't forget to like and share with your friends, because it matters what you think.
In order to understand reality as a whole, one of the most important distinctions is the distinction between potentiality and actuality. Spending some time with this distinction is critical to understanding Thomas Aquinas' arguments for the existence of God. So let us take a moment to consider this distinction in some detail. One of the basic puzzles that confronted ancient philosophers was the puzzle about change. How can the water in a river always be flowing by, and yet it remains the same river? Things are being and becoming, but how can they both be what they are and become something that they're not? By wrestling with these and various puzzles regarding change, Aristotle discovered the distinction between act and potency, or actuality and potentiality. The things around us in nature are not only what they actually are, but also what they can be. It is easy to see the distinction. A pot of water on the stove is actually cold and potentially hot. But once it is on a hot burner for some time, the potentiality to be hot becomes actualized. And when the water is actually hot, it is potentially cold. Aristotle realized that all things in nature are a blend of act and potency, like the water. For example, an acorn is potentially a fully grown oak tree. A child is potentially a grown man. And the water in the ocean is potentially a rain cloud over land. Aristotle realized that change consists of the actualization of the potentiality latent within the things of nature. The acorn grows into an actually tall tree. The child grows into a mature adult man, walking and talking. And the water in the ocean evaporates and condenses into a rain cloud, which then showers rain upon the land. All of these changes are the realizations of the potentialities hidden within things. When we think of change as the actualization of potential, a question confronts us. Why does the potentiality of things become actual? After all, potentiality does not realize itself on its own. Pondering this question led Aristotle to the conclusion that there must be some ultimate source of change. The ultimate source of change must be completely actual and not have any potentiality in it. But it is responsible for the realization of potentiality in everything else. The ultimate source of change he called the unmoved mover, or God. For readings, podcasts, and more videos like this, go to Aquinas101.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for one of our free video courses on Aquinas. And don't forget to like and share with your friends, because it matters what you think. What is truth? What is love? What is justice? When asking these questions, philosophers are asking for the essences of things, or more simply, what they are. The ancient philosopher Plato called the answers to these questions the forms, and he held the view that the forms exist in reality, separately from the particular things around us in nature. Aristotle also held that the forms are real, but he held that the forms exist in the things themselves around us in nature. In other words, Aristotle thought that things have essences, or natures, or forms, which make them to be what they are. The form of a particular German shepherd, for example, makes him to be a German shepherd. All things of nature have their forms or essences, and because they have their forms, they fall into the assortment of natural kinds that we observe around us in nature. Aristotle also realized that particular things are composed of matter. For Aristotle, matter is not just atoms or particles or tiny units as we are accustomed to think of it today. For Aristotle, matter is the universal substratum of pure potentiality that does not exist on its own except in union with a form, which makes it to be this or that kind of matter. All the things of nature are composed of matter and form, and this is what is called hylomorphism. Hylomorphism is a view about the constitution of the things of nature. The distinction between matter and form is related to the distinction between act and potency. The form of a thing is its act, and the matter of a thing is its potency. Just as things are a blend of potency and act, so they are a blend or a composition of matter and form. This holds at all levels of analysis down to the most fundamental units, which Aristotle called elements. Even the elements are composed of matter and form. It is the forms of things that make them to be intelligible, and when we ask what they are, it is their form that answers our question. For readings, podcasts, and more videos like this, go to Aquinas101.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for one of our free video courses on Aquinas. And don't forget to like and share with your friends, because it matters what you think.
The world around us is populated by distinct natural kinds of things. It's a simple but significant truth. Over the course of our lives, we encounter a variety of different things. It's just commonsensical. There are human beings, kangaroos, cactuses, stars, etc. What is more, this diversity of kinds is irreducible. We can't reduce it all down to some one unique thing. Some of the pre-Socratic philosophers tried to explain everything as elemental fire or water, as if there were only one element underneath everything. Many contemporary scientists try to explain everything as ordered bundles of chemicals, molecules, and atoms. One problem with this is that it cuts against the grain of common sense. The ordinary living beings we see around us are holistic and unified and don't seem reducible to mere bundles of atoms. Another problem is that these material building blocks themselves are diverse. There just are distinct atomic particles and chemical elements. How do we account for this complexity? The attempt to reduce everything to only one kind of thing is ill-fated, and it doesn't work. Let's call every natural kind, like a human being or an oak tree, a kind of essence. Each essence has material parts, but is also a holistic form. The material parts are organized and made intelligible by the form. What do I mean by this? Take the material organs of a human being, like the heart, lungs, liver, and brain. These organs all function as the organs of a whole animal, as dynamic parts of a living being. The kind of thing that the human being is gives order to all these parts, and they have their function in view of the purposes or functions of the whole human being. So, for example, we breathe oxygen, or we have sensations, we digest food, and so forth, in view of a host of more important human activities, like reasoning, friendship, family life, prayer. The organs all participate in the natural form, in this case being human, which exerts influence from the top down as an organizing principle from within. We see this at the lower levels within ourselves as well. So, for example, in organs, the gallbladder consists of various cells, but the cells are organized by the gallbladder's nature and function. We can predict their behavior based on the fact that they are cells of this particular kind of organ. The larger point is that in all the things we experience, there's both form and matter. Reality is not simply built up from the bottom, it's also influenced from the top down. The parts of things have their place within the whole. This is what we denote when we speak of material essences. The essence gets at what the thing is as a form-matter composite. When we think about what a thing is essentially, we think about its distinctive nature or formal features and about its typical material constitution. So we think about both form and matter. And once we've established the notion of essences, we can begin to account for how things differ. The nature of the kangaroo is different from the nature of the human being or the star. The nature of the gallbladder is different from the nature of the heart or the liver. The parts of things are arranged differently because they are parts of different things for different ends. The human heart is quite different from the stem of a plant. It is the nature of a given thing that gives shape and definition to the material parts. Now, once we've acknowledged that there really are distinct kinds of things, different essences, you might say, in the world around us, we can also begin to think about the presence of something common within all of them. Something common to stars and human beings and kangaroos. They're all united by the fact that they all exist. They all have being. A good summary statement is that essence answers to what a thing is, while existence or being answers to that it is, or the fact that it exists. Notice that this means that all these diverse kinds of things all exist. Existence is something common to all the various kinds of things that are, no matter how different they are. This shows us that the philosophical mystery of our nature or essence is distinct from the mystery of our existence. They're related topics, but they're also distinct. For readings, podcasts, and more videos like this, go to Aquinas101.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for one of our free video courses on Aquinas. And don't forget to like and share with your friends, because it matters what you think.